Okay, in this video, we're going to start out by creating our entity framework classes. Let's just start out by creating another project. Real simple. This is our library of objects. You can do this in the same project if you want to. I like to separate it out to make it a little bit more clean, put more business logic separate from it all. So we're going to create this as a class library. Be careful. You've got .NET Framework, you've got .NET Standard, you've got all these different things. This is just class library, and you'll see in the description it says a project for creating a class library that targets .NET Standard or Core. That's what we want. So we're going to call this Green Pages lib. We're going to put it in the same directory. We're going to make it support .NET Core 3.1, just like our web page project. Now, what we want to do here is we want to think about what objects do we want to be servicing in a phone directory. Obviously, we can get rid of class. So those things are people, and people have 0 to many phone numbers, 0 to many email addresses, and 0 to many addresses. So those are the objects we're going to create. Because this is an entity framework project, we're going to have to add in references to entity framework libraries so that we can do all this properly. So we're going to go ahead and do it for the solution. You can right click on either the solution or the project, but since we're doing it for both of these projects, let's do it on the solution. Right click and click Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And you're going to go to Browse. And we're looking for Entity Framework Core. So here's the main library. If you add certain ones, it'll add all the ones associated with it. We're going to add in Sql Server. This is an important one. We're going to go ahead and say it's for these two projects. Again, like I was saying before, you can do it for each one, but then you have to do it for both individually. So we're going to add it for both projects. We're going to install. It's going to tell us all the libraries it's actually installing with this. So it's installing just this one. Okay, well, the other ones will be bigger. I accept. We want design. What's the matter here? Interesting. Let's try just a little bit older version here. There we go. And this is what I was talking about. So you'll see all of the things it's installing along with it. So it's doing 5.12. So I'm going to make sure 5.0.12. Accept. I'm going to do design. I'm going to make sure to match my, I can always upgrade if possible. So we'll see if we can get this to work. So we're doing SQL Server design and tools. What do we have here? Dependencies, packages, tools still installing. All set. So now we've installed all of these packages so we can start using those with the classes that we're getting ready to create. So that's NuGet and how that works. And you'll see, like if you just click on the project itself, you'll see it adds in some package references for you. So a lot of this is all taken care of for you. You don't have to do much as far as that stuff goes. So that's that. All right, I'm just going to close a lot of stuff here so we can get started on creating our classes. So we're going to create a set of classes. Best practice is to create any entity base classes in a folder called models. So I'm going to create a folder called models. And I'm going to create my classes in there. So I'm going to add a class. This is my base class. I'm just going to call it person. Class. Real simple on the properties. So a couple of coding techniques. Properties are just so public int. I'm going to call this person ID. This is just a property of a class. Simple as that, right? A real simple coding trick. They call them code snippets. If you just type in PRO, prop, it gives you a framework for a property. So here I want to do first name as a property. Sorry, that should be string. That's why it was all yellow and yet mad at me. So if I do that again, you'll see prop string last name. Okay, so those are really just the only properties there are to a person as a person object that we care about right now. I mean, you could do title and, you know, birthday and stuff like, you know, we're just trying to make a quick and easy phone directory, right? So of course they do have phone numbers, email addresses, and mailing addresses, but those we don't have yet. So we're going to go back to this in just a second and look at those. So here we go, add new item. We're going to call it phone number. And we're going to keep this totally simple because we just want to keep moving along here. Public. Okay, so phone number has an ID, prop, int, phone number ID. And prop. I'm just going to do a string and just say phone number. We can go a little crazy with it. We'll call this number. .NET gets a little mad if you try to call phone number or something like that. We're just keeping this simple. We could do country code and area code and everything like that separately. We could do validation. We could do a bunch of stuff there. We're just keeping this simple for this project here. So we're just going to call it number. We're going to add a new item. We're going to call it email address. And even keeping it even easier, since it's just one thing, just call it, let's change this to make sure to make these public. Public is the scope. You want to make sure that it's available outside of this class library, so you want to make sure it's public class. Add new item. Again, I'm just going to copy to get started. And this one's. I know that an address has line 1, line 2, city, state, zip. Okay. So this is the basic idea behind this, right? Now, how do we set up the relationships between these objects? Well, there's two things that you have to do. First one being on the person object, you want to set up a collection of the other objects. So here we're going to say public iCollection phone number. You'll see here it does some nice code completion stuff. So if I type in P, it gives me phone numbers, plural, get me started. We want public iCollection addresses. Collection mail address. Now we've got the relationships from this direction, right? Now, the other direction, can more than one person share an address? Sure, but we're not worried about many-to-many and, you know, like that kind of thing. So we're just going to assume every person has a list of addresses, and although another person may have the same address, it's going to be a different record in the database, which is why we have an address ID to make it sure that we know which one the unique one is. So we want to relate this up to the person. So here we want to say public person. Okay. And we want the same thing in the other classes as well. And then there's one last thing we want to do. The .NET framework is going to create our database and our tables for us. So we want to do a couple of things here. One of them being that by default, if you just name this field ID, it is smart enough, I think it's capital ID like that. It's smart enough to know that that is the ID of this object. But I prefer to actually name the fields phone number ID and address ID. So that way it's more portable. Like I know what it is right away, right? It just makes it a little bit easier for me. So as a result, you need to do what's called decorating all of your properties that are IDs. So decorating is a way to tell the anything outside. So it's metadata about a field, but you can tell anything outside. This is a key, for example, right? So if I just type in key, you'll see there's red underline under here, but then you click show potential fixes. You can say, oh, I want to do data annotations. That's your decorations, right? So I will add that there. And then I can add this using phrase to all of the classes. And then I can make all of them keys. Okay, so that's basically it. I've created the classes. Now in the next video, what we're going to cover is actually using Entity Framework to create your database. And then when you make changes to your classes, how those are related back to the database. And we're going to cover a couple of really interesting little things, like what happens if I create a field in the database and I want it to have a different named property. I'll show you how to tie those together as well. So that's it. So we'll get into this, and we'll get into what's called the database context file and how to relate these things to each other there as well. So we'll get back to it. All right. That's it for this video, and I'll see you in a few minutes.